Hi, I'm Dennis Ariola, President and CEO of SoCalGas. We're proud to support the 30th anniversary of Air Talk with Larry Mantle, and we congratulate Southern California Public Radio on their 15th year of serving our region with the highest quality news and information programming. Thank you for your commitment to the diverse communities of Southern California.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Let's try that again. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. We are so excited to be here. One of the joys of being on the road and doing a live show is that we get to hear you, the audience on the radio. So after Larry comes out, he'll give you a sense of the ground rules, but we want to hear you in your most enthusiastic selves tonight because we are so happy to be here, and it'll be fun to bring this to the radio tomorrow. This week sometime, I'm sure. But anyway, welcome. We're so happy to be here at the Broad, the bulbous Broad. I feel like I should step a little to the other side here to fit in with the architecture. We've had such a great year here celebrating 30 years of Air Talk, 30 years of Larry Mantle being the longest serving public affairs host in the Southern California market. It's a great achievement and something we are so excited to bring on the road and to celebrate Larry and all of his accomplishments. So thank you for being a part of that, and thank you for coming here tonight. I'm Colin Campbell from KPCC, and I just wanted to put two things on your radar. One is that tomorrow in our talk, we're going to have Police Chief Charlie Beck, LAPD Police Chief Charlie Beck. And for those of you who have been following the officer-involved shooting project that KPCC has done, we've gone through the last 5 years of officer-involved shootings in LA County. Every time an officer has shot at someone and hit them, and reviewed how often those people are armed, how often they are unarmed, what kind of people they are, where it happens in the region. This is data the police department does not make public itself. It's data that the police commission does not count and report. And tomorrow we've asked Chief Beck to come on Air Talk and account for the police department's piece of that. And it's a conversation we're looking forward to very, very much, and Larry will handle very well. The other event I'd like to put on your radar is that next month we'll be in Redlands for the final stop of the Air Talk 30 tour. This is a look at the economy of the Inland Empire. As many of you will remember, it was among the hardest hit in the recession, and now it's growing jobs at almost a rate akin to Silicon Valley, which is a remarkable turnaround. Many of them are warehouse jobs, like the big Amazon facilities, and some things that are new wrinkles in the economy, but we're going to take a pretty deep look at that in place in the Inland Empire at Redlands. So we'd love to have you there as we end this tour. And of course, all of the programs that we've done are archived at kpcc.org. So thank you so very, very much for coming. It's such a joy for me to introduce Larry Mantle, 30 years on the job. You'll have to forgive him if he looks a little slow, a little old, if he seems like he's waning. We're just marching him out for the last couple of events. No, I'm just kidding. Larry has never looked better than this tour, and we're so excited to have you here tonight to talk about an important issue in this community right here at this event in the community. So with no further ado, here is Larry Mantle.
Thank you all so much. Great to have you here tonight at this brand new cultural treasure in downtown Los Angeles. How many of you, this is the first time you've been inside the Broad? So most of you, all right, yeah, big first time turnout here, and hopefully get a chance to come back and see the galleries here at the Broad, which just opened a couple of months ago. We're going to get started with our broadcast shortly. If this is the first one of our KPCC Air Talk on the Roads that you've been to, what we typically do is a live-to-tape production. So what you hear in the program tonight will 95% or more be turned over and aired day after tomorrow on the program. So Thursday is when you will hear this, starting at 11:40 in the morning. After we do a couple of other segments of news of the day, we'll go into the broadcast of what you hear tonight. We also structure these programs around audience participation. At the back of the room, I hope you saw when you came in, little index cards that you can fill out at any point tonight, particularly early on. You just put down the question that you'd like to ask. Please put down your full name and the community that you're from, And then when we go to our second break of the program tonight, they'll bring me the ones they think are going to have the most universal interest, and I'll call out your name. We'll ask you to come up and actually line up at the microphone to ask your question of the panelists. So I hope you'll think about taking part in doing that. And a little bit later, I'll give you when the deadline is to put your filled out card into the little glass vase at the back of the room to do that. And you get to hear all that Colin said, but if just a reminder about your devices, if you'd please silence them. But if you want to tweet, if you want to take part in social media, that's great. So we just ask that you don't have any sound coming from your device. If you'd like to take photos, that's also fine. We just ask you to please turn off the flash, just so it's not distracting. Although with the bright lights here, I'm not sure we'd even notice. But just to be safe, that would be great. How many of you are listeners to Air Talk as opposed to just hearing about the topic and are interested in that? How many of you listen to the program fairly regularly? That's great. Well, I want to let you know how much I appreciate your listening, how much it means to us. If you're a financial supporter of KPCC, that's even better yet if you haven't done so. We, of course, appreciate your funding to help us with all the programming that we do covering these very important local issues, like the future of downtown Los Angeles. Well, let me now quickly introduce our panelists. I'm just going to give you a name and title. I'll give a little bit more when we actually get into the broadcast itself. First of all, sitting right next to me will be the founder and director of Las Familias del Pueblo, Alice Callahan. Next to her will be Los Angeles City Councilman who represents this area, Jose Huizar. And then close to the middle here of our panel, the Executive Director of the Los Angeles Downtown News, John Regardi. Next to John is the President and CEO of the Central City Association of Los Angeles, Carol Schatz. And next up is the co-owner of a place maybe you've had a drink or two at. It's the Escondite Bar, the Hideout, Brian Trainum. And finally, the man who founded the DTLA Rising blog, Brigham Yen. So we'll get everybody's microphone set up and we'll get going. So what the format is tonight is we have 4 distinct segments. They're anywhere from 13 to 17 minutes, so they go really fast. We take a little bit of a break so that if any of us need to go down the hall, we can do that and come back and continue the program. And then we'll use the final segment for questions from those of you who have questions that we're able to select for the program. So Dave is our engineer. He's getting back there to get set up for us to roll. Let me quickly introduce 3 of our Air Talk producers who are here this evening. Senior producer of the program, Lauren Osen. Our producer who produced this evening's program that you're going to see, Fiona Ng. And here just to have a good time because she's such a fan of the show that she works on, Jasmine Tufaha. I'm incredibly fortunate to have a simply great production team. And I think our engineer is also here, Sean Campbell. I think he's sitting toward the back. Yeah, Sean. And he doesn't have to work tonight. So that's great, because Dave McKeever is engineering tonight's program. Dave, thank you very much. All right, we're all set to go? All set. All right, thank you, sir. From the Broad Museum in downtown Los Angeles, this is an Air Talk 30th anniversary on the road broadcast. Welcome. I'm Larry Mantle. This is the first show broadcast from the Broad, and we're taking on an issue directly related to this area's future. The Broad is the most recent major addition to downtown Los Angeles. It opened less than 2 months ago and reinforces the Grand Avenue Arts Corridor that includes the Music Center, Walt Disney Concert Hall, MoCA, and the Colburn School of Performing Arts. Grand also includes the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels and Grand Park. This area, like much of downtown, was quiet after office hours. Well, that's changed with huge apartment complexes, high-rise condos, and renovated historic buildings bringing in thousands of residents. The downtown population now estimated at over 50,000. Now, to cater to the new, relatively well-off residents and their friends, high-end restaurants and bars are constantly opening. The economic boom is bumping right up against a massive increase in the number of homeless residents. It's a jarring visual image on the streets of downtown and one that raises questions about downtown's future. Let me introduce our panelists in conversation. First of all, joining me is someone who's worked for years on this issue of homelessness in Los Angeles, Alice Callahan, founder and director of Las Familias del Pueblo. Alice Callahan. Also with us, the city council member who represents downtown Los Angeles and is co-chair of the city council's Committee on Homelessness and Poverty, Jose Huizar. John Regardi is executive director of the Los Angeles Downtown News. Carol Schatz, for decades now, has been head of the Central City Association of Los Angeles and the Downtown Center Business Improvement District. Brian Trainum is the co-owner of the Escondite Bar, the Hideout. He's former co-owner of Bar 107. I think some fans of 107 in the audience. And Brigham Yen is a downtown resident and founder of the DTLA Rising blog. So let's start out with a little bit of background. What's going on in downtown? John Regardi of the Downtown News. Let's talk about this, because you first covered this area 2 decades ago, left covering downtown, then came back. So what's changed?
Yeah, basically what's changed is everything. I would say it's a difference of night and day, except it's more day and night, because back then, 20 years ago, there was only daytime activity. Now there is nightlife almost every night in downtown Los Angeles. The things that have happened, Larry, are, it's a cliche, but they are unthinkable. No one could have fathomed 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, that a Whole Foods would open in downtown, that we would get a $140 million museum of this ilk, that there would be rock and roll clubs opening in multiple parts of the city, and hip kids would be coming in from all across the region to see shows, or in some cases to even live down here. Everything that's going on is utterly mind-blowing, and if the community is not yet a 24/7 neighborhood, then it's probably an 18 to 27 neighborhood.
So what's missing for the newer arrivals? What do you think? I mean, markets are opening. What still needs to happen?
There are definitely still some things that are missing. The community could certainly use more parks, because we're seeing more families who are arriving, and there aren't necessarily enough places for the kids to play. On the same bent, there's definitely a need for more schools. There's one charter school and a few other elementary schools, and we hear plenty of people saying we really need more educational opportunities. There also needs to be more housing of mixed levels, not just for very low income, not just for some of the really expensive units, but what's called the workforce housing, units that the teachers, the administrative assistants can afford, because, a lot of these new units are coming online, and you're talking about, 500 square foot places going for $2,000 a month. A lot of people feel, that's too much, and it's not diverse enough.
You've covered a lot of the tension between the newer arrivals and the growing homeless population in downtown Los Angeles. And what's the range of how people are either frustrated with encounters that they have or accepting of that is part of downtown life?
I think you'll find some of both. You know, very few people move to downtown Los Angeles unfamiliar with an urban community. A lot of people who come here have lived in other cities. They're used to city life. A lot of people here want to be part of the solution. They want to be helpful. They accept that many of the homeless individuals were here before they arrived. So there is, I believe, a general desire from the vast portion of downtowners to be part of the solution, for it to be inclusive. Certainly what gets people thinking and talking differently is when there are encounters that are viewed as dangerous.
Well, I want to get to the crime increase, because this year there has been an increase of over 50% in violent crime, about 25% increase in property crimes, if I'm not mistaken. So what's the response from your readers to that?
People are very concerned about that, as they would be in any other neighborhood. You're seeing a lot things like a lot more bike thefts than there ever were before. So yes, people are absolutely frustrated. They want to know what they can do to reverse that situation and keep themselves safe. So in that regard, I don't think it's different than other neighborhoods. Everyone wants a safe place to live.
Alice Callahan, I wanted to talk with you about the longer-term residents, the homeless population of downtown, which has grown dramatically. What are the biggest factors, in your view, having worked with this population for decades, that's driving the increase?
Yeah, first of all, I think that gentrification is neither good nor bad. That's really not the question. The question is whether it's smart and whether it's humane. In 1977, the Community Redevelopment Agency of Los Angeles adopted a comprehensive planning document that said the highest priority downtown needed to be a solution, a comprehensive solution to the Skid Row problem, that Skid Row was the key, the document said, to revitalization of downtown. It did not call for the dispersal of the people on Skid Row. In fact, it did the opposite. It said what was critical was that they save the housing, improve it, not keep the filth and the squalor, but fix up the neighborhood, save the housing, add additional housing, improve the social service network, while developing in the outline borders of Skid Row to mitigate its negative impact in the rest of downtown, doing some buffer zone activities. At the time, there were over 9,000 single-room occupancy hotels that the redevelopment agency was concerned about saving, housing approximately 11,000 of the city's poorest. And then about 20 years later, that plan was abandoned for what I would call laissez-faire economics, at which time a group of developers decided that they would make a great profit by purchasing buildings at the corner of 4th and Main. And what's important to understand about 4th and Main is more than 1/3 of all that 9,000 unit housing was on Main Street. So although those developers did not buy existing housing, they bought other buildings. You cannot go to an impoverished neighborhood and throw a Hilton down in a parking lot and pretend that somehow that not is directly responsible for the ensuing rise of property values down that street and the loss of low-income housing. We now today have just over 3,600 housing units, from over 9,000 to 3,600, and that's after you add in all the new units that the city has built, and you subtract all the ones that we have lost that are no longer affordable. We have exactly just under 3,600 units, and now the public sidewalks are the housing, de facto housing, and will be for, my guess is, decades.
What happened to that SRO housing, all those units? Are those buildings still there? Were they converted? What happened?
Some of the buildings are gone. Many of the buildings have been converted. As soon as the property owners up and down Main Street saw that there was a chance they were going to be able to more than double, triple, or quadruple their rents, people began to convert their buildings to higher uses.
And so were those SRO hotels housing people during this time, or had they been abandoned in the interim?
No, there were some hotels where the owners let them empty and did not refill the rooms with the plans of gentrifying them. But in fact, the very people we now have on the sidewalk were the very people that were housed. It housed the mentally ill, it housed the addicted, it housed the poor, the handicapped, the disabled of every sort. The very people we now see on our sidewalks used to live in the single-room occupancy hotels that are no longer available. And there is nowhere else in the city for a person whose total income is a $227 general relief check to move to. So they have moved out of the housing, but not by choice, and they are on the sidewalks, not by choice.
So your contention is, had the city held to that plan that you're describing and protected that housing for people with subsidized housing, you still could have had gentrification in other parts of downtown. You could have served both masters. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that was the smart plan, and it should have been held to. The whole city would have benefited, because now we're going to build large and massive shelters, and who's going to pay for those shelters? But all of us in this room. Who pays every time we arrest them and send them to jail for almost $50,000 a year? We pay for that.
Let me bring in Carol Schatz. Let me bring you into the conversation at this point. How do you see this history?
I see it differently. First of all, the policy that Alice is, I think, referring to is what we call the containment policy, which we think was a disaster for downtown and for the city, because it concentrated all services in this one area instead of dispersing them throughout the city. And so it created this ghetto of misery and poverty. And that's not healthy at all. Two, let's be very clear about the, quote, gentrification. Gentrification is not displacement. And in the case of the revitalization that you've seen in the creation of new housing units, which is something like 23,000 since 1999, and Alice referred to 4th and Main. Those were 3 office buildings that had been, the city had owned 1, had been empty, not utilized, and they were converted to housing. And the only people who were displaced in that process were some pigeons and probably some rats, and that was it.
The rats are still there.
The rats are still there. Okay, all right, I stand corrected.
That's Brian Trainham with that
right.
Interjection there. But what I was hearing Alice Callahan saying is, not that people lived there, but when that was redeveloped and people moved in, people of means moved into that property, it put market forces on the adjacent properties, and that drove it out. So what I was hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alice Callahan, is that if you don't have what you call the containment strategy and you try to do dispersal, market forces are going to be so strong you can't protect little pieces of housing for low-income people.
If I could add to that, it's not just, it wasn't so much a containment policy, but the 65 SROs were there, and so you could save them. You couldn't put, at that time, low-income housing, even for a poor 5-year-old child, anywhere there in the city without people complaining out of fear that that 5-year-old was somehow going to pillage and rape in the community. So if you couldn't move the people from Skid Row elsewhere, if you couldn't duplicate that single-room occupancy affordable housing elsewhere, all you could do was save it. So protecting the row, as what you like to call a containment policy, was protecting an irreplaceable housing source.
It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to say that because other communities didn't want it, we have to keep this population here. It is time for all the other communities in Los Angeles to accept their fair share of this problem. This is not a downtown problem. This is a human problem. It is manifesting itself all over the city, and every community has to accept their fair share.
Well, let's bring Councilman Huizar into this conversation. Is that realistically going to happen, that you're going to have communities say, yes, we will allow housing for low-income people to be developed near our homes that are of substantial value?
Well, I think the tide is changing, Larry, in terms of what we see at the City Council. Just today, the City Council voted to create voluntary storage units throughout the city and not continue to just build them in Skid Row and downtown Los Angeles. And that's very different from past approaches by the city with respect to where are we providing these services for homeless individuals. In the past, there's been a lot of NIMBYism, right? Not in my backyard. At the county level, I don't know what the politics are there yet now, but the sea of change that has occurred in the city is because homelessness is now everywhere. It's not just in Skid Row and Hollywood and Venice, those areas that have historically had a high concentration of homeless individuals. Now other council members are getting calls from their constituents, and they're saying, hey, there's people out in my street, my sidewalk, do something about it. So the other council members are feeling pressure, and we're moving in a direction towards decentralization of services.
I understand you're hearing the pressure and your colleagues are getting a lot of pressure, but how does that pressure translate into saying we're okay with having X units of housing for homeless people created in our community?
We're doing it. Like
Where?
I said, we just opened something up in the valley in Councilmember Mitch Englander's district. We created a number of units for permanent supportive housing, an area, a community that in the past had said not in our area. Creating storage units now. We've put aside about $2 million today to create more voluntary storage for homeless individuals can store their items. So we're moving in that direction. And I think it's a good thing to do because, after all, when an individual falls into homelessness, studies have showed, or into poverty, studies have shown that if you get the services and support in those areas in a neighborhood where you're familiar, you're most likely to get back on your feet. And right now what we do is put them in areas that are more dangerous, and they continue to cycle down into further despair.
Even if these communities, though, take that on for people that are homeless near where they live, is that going to relieve the pressure on the greatest concentration, which is here downtown?
It will relieve the pressure downtown. It will relieve the pressure here in Hollywood and Venice, because right now that's where we take our homeless, where the hospitals continue to dump, where people from across the country continue to come here to our areas. It will relieve the pressure on areas that have historically seen overconcentration.
We'll continue our conversation from the Broad Museum in downtown Los Angeles. This is Air Talk on the Road, our 30th anniversary, talking about the future of downtown Los Angeles. We'll be back right after an update of the news.
So how long is this?
Is everybody good to continue, or does anybody need a break? We're okay?
Not yet.
Okay?
Next,
right.
next. Signal it if I don't do a good job.
A reminder that now is a good time. If you want to pick up a card, if you have a question, it's a great time for you to do that during this very brief break, and then we'll continue. I just ask again, please put your full name and the community you're from on the card, and put it right back in that glass bottle in the back of the room, please. Dave, you ready for us to resume? Okay, thank you. From the Broad Museum in downtown Los Angeles, this is an Air Talk 30th anniversary on the road. We're here for the first broadcast coming from the new Broad Museum of Contemporary Art, and we're talking about the larger downtown, the biggest issues that are facing it as more residents move in, more restaurants, more bars. What about the dramatically increasing homeless population as well? What about some of the needs of people who are newer arrivals to get an even more enriched experience with schools and parks and things for their dogs, which is also a big challenge for those who live downtown, as you know if you walk down downtown streets. Joining us on the panel, John Rigardi, who's LA Downtown News Executive Editor, Alice Callahan of Las Familias del Pueblo, she's founder and director, Brigham Yen, downtown resident, founder of the blog DTLA Rising, Councilmember Jose Huizar, who represents the area and co-chairs the council's Homelessness and Poverty Committee, Carol Schatz, president of the Downtown Central Business Improvement District, and Brian Trainham, co-owner of the Escondite Bar, former co-owner of the very popular Bar 107. Carol Schatz, you wanted to say something just real briefly when we had to break briefly, and then I want to move on to our next panelist.
I want to stress as well that downtown, first of all, we've got over 3,000 units of permanent supportive housing. There is no area in the county that has as much of a concentration of those very important units than downtown. Another 3,000 of just SRO units. And there's a regulatory framework that exists downtown to preserve these units that doesn't exist anywhere else. So both the Wiggins settlement and the residential hotel ordinance requires that requires one-to-one replacement if anything is attempted in terms of changing the use of a building or whatever. That
Well, then,
doesn't
how does that line up with what Alice Callahan was saying, that many of these units were lost to revamps for higher rents?
My understanding is that if a property owner, like at the Cecil, decides that they don't want to basically turn the whole building into SROs, there is no requirement that they do that. But there was no displacement of those units.
Alice
It wasn't
Callahan.
a question. It wasn't a question of that.
The
Okay.
Cecil used to be full of, 600 and some
Well-
of the poorest of the city. If you want to rent a room in the Cecil now and you phone, they will probably tell you that for Saturday night, depending on what's going on, it'll cost you $91 a night. The smallest amount I've ever heard charged was $60 a night. There are no affordable rooms left in the Cecil. So we have lost
Wait a minute.
every room in the
The
Cecil
Cecil is
Hotel.
covered by a settlement agreement that says that at least half of the rooms have to be for a permanent supportive housing.
They are not.
Let me bring into our conversation Brigham Yen, downtown resident, founder of the blog DT LA Rising. So you are one of those gentrifiers coming into downtown. How do you?
We finally put a face to it, right?
Yeah, there he is. Look at him. No, seriously. You embrace the term, I know, on your blog. And so, describe your perspective as a more recent arrival. What is living downtown like for you?
Well, I think right now, being a resident of downtown is, it can be very difficult as it pertains to the homeless population, only because I think right now also we're being called a gentrifier, we're made to feel guilty. And I think that's incorrectly framing the situation because, I wanted to move downtown for reasons completely independent of, trying to displace or homeless people. That's not what the intention was. There's a lot of people like me who want to live in an urban landscape, in an urban lifestyle. So living downtown has been difficult because, when you go about your daily business, if you go to Ralph's, for instance, several times I've gone to Ralph's, went to the restroom, and you find a hypodermic syringe needle in the bathroom. And anecdotally speaking, I've heard, homeless people having sex in front of Ralph's in broad daylight. And, walking down the street at night, you feel unsafe a lot of times because you feel like you're going to get accosted, and it's not unreasonable to think that way. Last year at 5th and Broadway, I was assaulted by a homeless individual while I was blogging. I was covering a story there, and I'm just doing my thing, and a homeless person came up to me and grabbed me and was going to hit me. I obviously, was able to get away, but, these types of experiences have made it very difficult to live somewhere that you really want to be. And I think, the community wanted to embrace like the new park, like Spring Street Park, which hasn't been without its, drawbacks because of the dog situation. But, a lot of people have, found it uncomfortable to go into the park now because they're finding needles in the playground. And so these type of, situations, these issues are not comfortable for residents here. And so I don't think that being somebody who wants to live somewhere because they love the lifestyle, we somehow have to be blamed and for something that's not necessarily what we caused. So for us moving into downtown, we're not causing this situation, but there are two groups of people now that are now supposedly clashing.
What the people that read your blog and just your friends, your neighbors, your acquaintances, is there consistency in what they would want to see about dealing with this, or are their opinions all over the map?
I obviously know a lot of people in the community, and the majority of people that I know that live downtown feel very similar to me, but they feel very afraid to say anything because of just the stigma attached to this issue. If you criticize the situation, you're immediately painted as somebody who's insensitive or an elitist, or you're a gentrifier, this is your fault. And so I think there's a lot of people that live downtown that feel the way I do because they may have gone through similar experiences, but they're afraid to say anything. And that's the feedback that I'm getting is there's a lot of frustration, but there's just a fear of being able to express that frustration because it's politically incorrect to do so.
Have you seen people who've moved downtown and dug it for a while and then left because of this?
Yes, I know a few people, and there are people that I know that are preparing to leave. Living near the historic core, like, by Fifth and Hill, there's a couple of friends that I know that are preparing to move out of downtown because they can't handle that anymore. Just the other day, there was a lady who was sitting on the side of the curb on Hope Street without her pants on. And it's very sad. It's actually very, very sad to see that. And, sometimes when I walk through downtown LA, I feel like I'm walking through an outdoor insane asylum because it feels like it's just one huge area with a lot of mentally ill people. You can sit at a cafe, you can't sit there, rather, and just enjoy your food. There's constantly people coming up to you asking, panhandling, asking for change. Sometimes it can be more aggressive, and they can accost you. And that's especially uncomfortable if you're walking alone at night on a block and you are accosted.
Yeah, Alice Callahan, let me just ask you about that because there's so many people who are living on the streets who have serious mental illness or drug addiction and other untreated conditions that they're dealing with. You have any advice for people who encounter them on the streets downtown?
No, it is unfortunate that we do not have adequate services or housing, good affordable housing in the neighborhood for the mentally ill. But I think there's also people slide between being afraid of a genuinely threatening, aggressive person and just the homeless in general. There are private security guards all up and down Main Street and probably on all the other streets where there are restaurants. And you will not find no homeless people anywhere on that street standing around because the very sight of a poor person, particularly a minority poor person, is felt as very threatening to people. So I think there's a tendency to sort of put everybody together in a mindset. I think there's a general fear of the homeless. Some whom, again, are dangerous people and need help, and others who are dangerous people and the police ought to deal with. They're trained to deal with crime. But most homeless people are not a threat.
And some that may appear threatening are not a threat, but it's still hard for people to be sworn at as they walk by or spat at, or the things that do happen with encounters with people that are homeless.
And I think you're going to see more of it. I think the longer we force people into poverty and to life on the sidewalk, more and more people incrementally get used to that lifestyle, and people who would have never gone to the bathroom in public, after a while get used to it because it's the only choice they have and the only choice they've had for a significant amount of time.
Absolutely.
Carol Schatz,
Absolutely untrue.
which part are you taking issue with?
This concept that somebody of color and who is poor is somebody that we don't want to deal with. That is absolutely untrue. And we have seen what is very concerning to me is that one of the things that we're most proud of, having been the architects of this revitalization, and let's not forget what downtown looked like 25 years ago when I began. And if we wanted to keep that as the center of our city, then shame on us. But we now have young families who agreed to be pioneers and who were planning to raise their children in downtown LA. And I have talked to several of them. They formed an organization. And they came here without any malevolent concepts of the homeless. They wanted to participate in solutions to solve the problem, and they are moving out. Several of them have told me about that they've been accosted with their children in strollers by homeless individuals, and whether it advocates want to hear this or not, this is happening on a daily basis. It's happened to my staff, it's happened to me, it's happened to, and I hear it anecdotally, and forget about the anecdotes. LAPD statistics show that there's been a significant rise in crime, and no other community in this city would tolerate that. And we've got to preserve this, because think about over 100,000 jobs have been created with this renaissance. We have given this city a real center. We are the second largest city in the United States of America, and we had no center. It was dirty, it was blighted, it was unsafe. And here we changed old empty office buildings into a thriving community. We got to keep that going with the understanding that we need more services to deal with the mentally ill and the addicted. And let's not forget about addiction, because it makes you do a lot of things.
We'll pick this up in a moment. Carol Schatz joining us from the Central City Association, the Downtown Center Business Improvement District. We're coming your way from the new Broad Museum in downtown Los Angeles along the Grand Avenue Arts Corridor. We're going to continue our conversation, hear from more of our panelists, and hear these differing perspectives on the future of downtown right after this news update. This is the last call. If you would like to put your card with a question and your full name on it in the jar, this is your last call. And then our producers will go through and try and find the ones they think are going to have the most general interest among listeners. And if it's hard to get out of the row where you are, you can just pass it out to the aisle and we'll pick them up if it's hard for you to get out to the aisle. You have a customized name tag? That is nice. Where'd you get that from? That's nice.
You know, I did have a report the other day in a committee where the resources for growing the housing with the mines. Grand Canyon. It's the Grand Canyon. We were so far behind.
Okay, last call for the cards. Lauren, are you back there getting? Okay, great. So we're all set. We'll get those. It's similar to what we do with listener calls. When listeners call in, try and screen, make sure that they're of interest to the largest number of listeners possible. Okay, we're going to resume with part 3 of our 4 parts. All right, great. Thanks, Dave. From the Broad Museum in downtown Los Angeles, this is an Air Talk 30th Anniversary on the Road broadcast. Big crowd here at the Broad, the first radio broadcast from the Broad, and we're joined by a panel talking about downtown Los Angeles' future. What's it going to be like in the decades to come? With us is Brian Trainum, who is co-owner of the Escondite Bar, Carol Schatz, president of the Downtown Center Business Improvement District, Jose Huizar, LA City Councilman who represents the area, Brigham Yen, who has the DTLA Rising blog, Alice Callahan of Las Familias Diaz del Pueblo. She's the founder and director, and John Regardi is the executive editor of the LA Downtown News. I bring into the conversation Brian Trainum, who's co-owner of the Escondite Bar. Thank you very much for being with us. Now, you had an experience of a very popular bar, lost its lease, it closed, you've opened up with a partner, another bar. What changes have you seen as a business person downtown?
I've seen a lot of changes, actually. When we were down here, I've actually came from Baltimore, Washington, D.C., where this happened. I came from Lower East Side, where this happened. I came from the West Side of Chicago, where this happened.
Where what happened?
What we're going through right now. And I left Chicago because of it, because it was boring to me. Where I was living, we didn't get displaced, we left, and we came downtown because it was just, you could do whatever you wanted without any regard of anything down here at that time. It was pretty amazing. I miss those days. I really do.
We won't get into the details.
I'm not going to get into my personal stuff, man.
But contrast that with
so what
what's
happened?
it like now?
Okay, what happened is I knew in 2005 when I went to the Golden Gopher was actually the first bar. It's not the developers that make a city. It's the artists and the bars and restaurants. It's not the developers. It's not. It's the people that put their life and energy into this, and then crowds want to come to those places, live by them, and that's then the developers come in and do their thing. All four cities, that's how it happened. I lived in where I lived because I wanted to be near the artists. I wanted to live near the nightlife. I didn't go there because the building was nice, because it wasn't. And it wasn't nice down here. And the lights used to blink at 12 o'clock on Spring Street. It was great. And it's still great. But what's happening is when I got 107, I knew this was going to happen, John. I knew exactly. I've been through 4 cities of this. This is my 4th. It's going on in Seattle. It's going on in San Diego and Portland. Right now in San Francisco, it's happening in Oakland, for Pete's sake. No one want to live in Oakland. It's big. It's booming. The whole West Coast, this is happening. So when I got 107 in 2005, I made it a dive bar because I knew that this was going to happen, and where are the people that built this city going to drink? Because sooner or later, everything's going to be $15 for a gin and soda, and it's $15 for a gin and soda.
So the only thing that's going to reverse it is another recession? Is that the only thing that's going to...
It's not. It's people that come and open businesses and go for the middle ground. When I had the dive bar, that was great. So the Escondite, I moved back into Skid Row proper. It's in Skid Rowkio, we coined it, because it's at 4th and Boyd. And that's Skid Row, but it's right on the edge of Little Tokyo, so we call it Skid Rowkio. I've been dealing with the homeless problem for 10 years down here. When I opened 107, it was like Michael Jackson's Thriller every night on 4th Street. Every night. It's not a joke. It was Michael Jackson's Thriller every night. And people were scared to go there. But I'm from Chicago, so people didn't mind it because we're like, whoa. They're like, wow, this is kind of bad, but it ain't the South Side. So they came to my bar, and it got better and better and better. But as it got better, things changed, and I saw the change around 2008, and that's when I started going to 410 Boyd, which is now the Escondite, because no one went there, because they were afraid to go there because it was in Skid Row. For some reason, I love it.
You said about the people going for the mid-level of the market.
Yes.
But can those people get in now?
They can. They just have to be a little bit more crafty, and they have to. It's not easy. If you think it's glamorous, you're sadly mistaken. It's 12, 16, 18-hour days, at least 3 to 5 years, and you don't have a life. And that's just the way it is, and that's what I chose because I wanted to be part of this. I wanted to try to sculpt something and have a place where people could be just themselves. You don't have a dress code. We had a guy upstairs in the Barclay that used to come in his robe and read his paper, and it was awesome.
You had a really diverse crowd at
Great
107.
crew, and that's what we went for. We wanted diverse, and that's what's missing, I believe. The only diversity, back in 2005, it was the perfect diversity. There was so many different people down here. That's why I loved and saw the city. And 10 years later, the only diversity I'm basically seeing now is of the ones that have and do not have. It's very interesting. And
yeah, Carol Schatz?
We constantly recommend to developers who are, members of our organization or property owners, that when they're putting in a new restaurant or a bar, that they should focus on the middle. Because we don't want to see a high-end kind of super wealthy she downtown. I just left New York. There's the meatpacking district there. I walked around. This is where the New Whitney Museum is, and I went blech, because it's all these designer clothing places and really expensive restaurants, and everybody looked and acted very pretentious, and it's just like, no. What's great about downtown is the diversity. It may not be as diverse in terms of
You're a little off mic there, Carol.
what you've experienced, but it is certainly more diverse in terms of the offerings for, dry goods, retail,
A lot more
bars
places
and
to spend
restaurants,
money, yeah.
low-end
Council-
stuff and high-end stuff. And
Councilman
we want to keep it
Huizar,
that way.
let me bring back into this. So we just heard the comment that it's become haves and have-nots in downtown Los Angeles. And what can the city do, if anything, to keep what diversity is there and to help encourage, middle-class people to be downtown?
Well, I think what John Rigardi mentioned in the beginning, which is as we build more housing in downtown, it has to be for workforce housing and for teachers, police officers, middle-class families to be able to raise their children here. And I think that's really what's going to give downtown its long-term sustainability. What we're building right now, it's not sustainable for the long term. I think you need folks who are established, grow some roots here, and those are typically families. What we see in the pipeline right now in terms of new housing units coming online, they're mostly luxury units. And we kind of accepted that initially because we wanted the investment. We wanted to encourage people to come in, build, and so we were not putting too many impediments in front of their way. But I think there's going to come a time, and it's coming now, which is we're beginning to ask, if someone is asking for some discretionary land use approval from the city, we're now beginning to be a bit more forceful about the type of housing they're building, not only in terms of affordability, but also are you adding 2 or 3 bedrooms for families. And that's what we're trying to do at this point. We weren't at that point 5 years ago. We're there now, and so I think we could ask for more now.
Why a family-friendly downtown as opposed to having what so many urban cores are, either empty nesters or younger people without kids cycling through the area? Why is it important to have families downtown?
It's important because those are the folks who put some roots down and are demanding upon their local government for better parks, better public amenities. I think if you have empty nesters coming and going, they could get up and move and vote with their feet. People who are here for the long term are demanding those safe playgrounds for their children, are demanding those good schools, and that's really what I think is going to start building a neighborhood. Once you start building a neighborhood, people are more invested, are asking more of their local government, you get more safety, get more people walking on the street and the sidewalks, and I think that's going to help us. And it doesn't mean we can't have a mix of those.
So is a school likely to make its way downtown?
A school?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, right now we have a very successful charter school called Metro Charter, which started with some parents at a local park saying we need a good school for our kids, otherwise we're going to move out. And those parents started that school, very successful, huge waiting list to get in, and we need more of those. It's always a question of a middle school. I was formerly in the Board of Education in this region overall, as is for many parents throughout the area, is what is our middle school? And I think that's something that's going to be needed in the near future for downtown
And is
LA.
there space, or would this be an office building school?
We would have to get creative. The good thing about charter schools is that they don't have to abide with some very strict state guidelines about where you build. Charter schools could move into practically any building.
Okay, John Rigardi.
Yeah, I think it's also important, Larry, to have a bit of context as we're talking about haves and have-nots. This is not Beverly Hills. This is not Pacific Palisades, and I don't want it to come off thinking it's a comparison of Pacific Palisades and the zombie apocalypse that Brian referred to earlier. There is no...
It was, though, dude. It was like that.
Oh, yeah,
it was unbelievable.
There is no Tiffany store here. There is no Harry Winston store. Yes, there's a Whole Foods, but that just came. There's still a lot of, mid-priced, mid-level institutions, businesses that are arriving. A Burlington coat factory just opened.
What about
Ross
what about the
on
artists,
Broadway.
though? Because I mean, that's one thing Brian was saying is the artists, the creative people. This was the place they could afford to live. That typically is the place in depressed downtowns before they get redeveloped. Can the artists afford to stay here? I mean, the Arts District is a place that's getting tremendous development pressure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A lot of them no longer live in the area. But again, certainly there is a loss of an aspect of a long-time aspect of the community. On the other hand, not saying this is good or bad, but a lot of those people got in at times when you could have a huge live-work space for 50 cents a square foot. That may have been great then, unsustainable now.
What's interesting, Larry, if I could
Councilman.
add, is that one of the most demanded areas in downtown right now is the Arts District near the LA River. And that area there has seen some property values just skyrocket, and there's a lot of pressure for growth there. And the challenge is, how do we keep the ambience of an artist district and protect the character and integrity of that neighborhood while allowing new housing to come in, new businesses to come in, new retail. And you see some of the pioneers who first came in the 70s and 80s when they came in with a 50 cents a square foot that are still there, but slowly they're cashing out as well, but they are, you don't see as many of them around. But it is attracting the artist type folks into that area, so I think you're going to find an interesting mix there.
Yeah, I wonder, most artists, unless they're, extremely successful, how they're going to afford it. Is there a model of other cities where, non-famous artists can be able to afford to live in what's a thriving downtown?
In New York, we left the island and went to Brooklyn. Brooklyn's done. So now we're going to the Bronx.
Well,
Bronx is on its way out. It just happens because there's a vibe with the artists. There's a vibe that happens that everyone wants to live around because I can't explain it.
So all
other than
the
that.
artists be out on Long Island somewhere wearing the...
I pray. I don't think they'll do that to themselves.
Yeah.
I think they'd rather live in Detroit.
Larry,
Councilman.
the city council just recently passed a first version of a new ordinance for all industrially zoned properties in the city, and it's going to apply particularly for the Arts District here in downtown. But should a developer come to us and want to convert property or rezone property for residential or commercial uses, there are certain community benefits they would have to do, certain square footage they would have to create within that building that would be a live workspace, and certain percentage of that would need to be affordable. So that's our attempt to try to create affordable housing for artists in those areas and create a live work area to continue their trade.
Back to Alice Callahan's forecast that you're going to be seeing people living on the streets for decades to come, that this is not being resolved. Do you have a different vision, or is that going to be the reality, but this is all going to happen around that?
Pardon me, can you repeat that?
Is that going to be the reality of thousands of people living on the street, but all this development is going to happen around that?
No, well, I think we have to move to a model of decentralization. And the good news is that whether, the effects on homelessness here in downtown is being affected by gentrification or not, the good news is there's a whole lot more attention being paid to the issue of homelessness now that we've ever seen, I think, in my short term on public service. But what I do see is the vision that I see for the future is a mixed downtown, which racially right now we have that. LMU study showed us that within the greater downtown area, you have about a quarter of each major group that exists in downtown, but a mixed downtown that has income levels of all types. Plus, you see obviously some services for Skid Row that you need to provide, but that it'll be on a decentralized basis. We have anywhere between 3,000 to 4,000 people who live in the streets in downtown LA today, based upon the latest report, and 25,000 throughout the city. And the issue is that people who are coming to downtown are not necessarily from downtown. We have to provide these services throughout the city.
Well, and if you're going to continue to see people released who are lower level offenders who can't get jobs and are not portable, they can't get up and move somewhere else with less expensive housing for whatever reasons, isn't this just going to have more and more people who are out on the streets without a chance of supporting themselves?
Well, a lot of folks have said that Proposition 47 is a culprit here, but that's anecdotal. We have yet to see the evidence
I'm just
for
kind of
that.
looking
Yeah.
at the math. I'm not blaming it for,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, if the lower level offenders who would have been put into jail or into prison, who are typically find it harder to get work, if they're not incarcerated, they're going to be out, right?
They're going to be out, and typically what we see right now is that our criminal justice system is the last resort for those individuals who are highly addicted to drugs that are probably committing those crimes because of their drug addictions, and that's really where we have to address the issue, is the drug addiction.
Alice Callahan.
For those types of populations.
Yeah, I think to a great extent we have to accept the fact that the ship has sailed, that there is such a quantity of the luxury side of the housing at this point that no matter what we try to do, that is what downtown is, and people can't afford to move downtown. And the highest priority remains a solution to the Skid Row problem. People have nowhere else to go. The poor cannot afford a $104 bus pass if we move them out to Pacoima because there's housing in Pacoima. People stay downtown. Think about it in the abstract. All Skid Row is the last place in a community you go if you have no family and you have no resources, where you find free or cheap housing, free food, and free clothing. That's what Skid Row is, and Skid Row is going to stay. That's where the services are. If you want people off the sidewalk of Skid Row, then give them affordable housing on Skid Row.
Yeah, all right. We're going to continue our conversation with questions from members of our audience. We're coming your way from the Broad Museum in downtown Los Angeles. It's Air Talk's 30th anniversary. Every month, a different community in which we stop. We're talking about the future of downtown Los Angeles. We'll be back right after this news update.
I thought he started asking you a question. He asked a question to me.
Okay?
I thought he was asking you a question.
Gregory of Boyle Heights, could you come on up? Someone gonna...
You know, I live in Boyle Heights,
And
you see it already by the...
Bronwyn of Glendale? Bronwyn? And Eric? Okay. If you right over here.
You just get to be the objective commentator.
Great. Are you Eric, by the way? Why don't I give you, and then you can give these to Gregory and Bronwyn. Oh, and Michael in Chinatown. Michael in Chinatown.
I think that the issue has become so prevalent that you can't do. That's a line I always use, that no matter who you are, you can't continue your business in downtown, whatever it is, unless you. And I mean business.
What's that? Oh, fortunately, no one has called. Okay, we're all set. All right, very good. Dave, we good to go? All right. From the Broad Museum in downtown Los Angeles, this is an Air Talk 30th Anniversary On the Road broadcast. I'm Larry Mantle. Great to have you with us. Next month, on December 9th, we're going to be in the Inland Empire, where KPCC is heard over KUOR. We'll be at the University of Redlands, and we hope that if you're an Inland Empire listener or in the eastern part of Los Angeles County, you'll come out and join us at the University of Redlands Wednesday night, December 9th. We'll be there talking about what's happening with the economy of the Inland Empire. Right now, we're talking about the future of downtown Los Angeles. Let me quickly reintroduce our panelists. John Rigardi of the LA Downtown News, Alice Callahan of Las Familias del Pueblo, Brigham Yen of DTLA Rising, Jose Huizar, Los Angeles City Councilman, Carol Schatz of the Downtown Center Business Improvement District, and Brian Trainum, owner of the Escondite Bar. We're taking questions from members of our audience here at the Broad. Sir, your first name and what community are you from?
How's it going? I'm Gregory Metcalf. I live in Boyle Heights.
Great. Gregory, go ahead, please.
Mine is for Brigham. You described your view of downtown. I'll just read it, actually. You say you want to live in an urban environment. Is that for a picturesque reason or real urban life? All major cities in the world deal with homeless people sleeping in parks and using public restrooms to bathe. Why should downtown LA just be a postcard of a downtown? Homelessness is a part of the urban landscape. I've often seen people urinate and use the restroom in public in cities like NYC and Paris. Why should it be different?
Brigham?
So, for me, I have obviously an Asian background. So my parents are from China and Taiwan. And so I have to respectfully disagree with that. In Asia, it's very different, and it might be this way in Western cities. But I just got back from Japan, Tokyo, not that long ago, and it's the largest city on the planet. There's 35 million people in the city, and the size of it is geographically the size of Los Angeles. And you really have to go to a place like Tokyo to really appreciate how a city can be. And so I was actually going to remark about that earlier, is that I don't think that living in an urban setting that you should forsake safety and cleanliness. And I'm actually going to Taiwan this December, and that's where my father lives. And visiting Taipei, it's just a whole nother world. It's very clean, it's orderly, it's very safe, and they do have a homeless population as well. But the dynamics there are obviously different. So for me, I don't think that an urban area by default has to be dirty or unclean or unsafe. The perception of it, at least.
Brigham, what are your thoughts about how to deal with this conflict in downtown? If you were mayor of downtown Los Angeles, what would you do?
Well, I feel like a lot of times I think it's healthy to open up the discussion, but I think people shouldn't be passing blame on each other like group to group. I think it pits people against each other, and there's really no productive way to come to a solution, because whatever side you're on, you're going to fight for that cause. And unless we can meet somewhere in the middle and compromise, there will be no solution. So I feel like, right now, I think the people that live in downtown, again, that I mentioned earlier, that are very frustrated, that are afraid to speak, I think that's wrong, because I think that if you are frustrated about a situation, you should be allowed to be able to, discuss that openly without fear of retribution from the other side.
Councilman Huizar,
Yeah, Larry, if I could add, the difference also is the intensity of what we see with the atmosphere that's created with homeless individuals. I don't think we'll get to a place where we have streets like Japan and Tokyo sparkling clean as we do, but it's just that in downtown there's been, to be quite honest, a huge neglect by government officials about how to address homelessness. Whether it's been just not having enough resources or setting a direct, firm policy about the direction that either the county, which provides a majority of social services, or the city provides, basically, we're responsible for clean streets and some housing. But we have neglected to deal with homelessness in the area. And now that we're beginning to deal with it and people are moving in from all over, we're finally saying, well, enough is enough. But it's the intensity of it. And I think in downtown, it's gone to a level which now people are paying attention because it's just gotten out of hand.
All right. Yes, your name, please, and what community are you from?
My name's Bronwyn. I live in Glendale, and I spend 5 days a week in downtown LA.
Great. So you're one of those like the population used to be. And Carol Schatz, how many people come into downtown to work every day?
We figure it's close to 500,000.
Wow. Okay. Your question, please.
Yeah. So one of the great things about being downtown is walking, being able to walk to stuff. You can walk to the library, the museum, and go see fabulous things, restaurants, and get a great cup of coffee. But right now, one of the hardest things to do is to walk in downtown LA. You can't go 2 blocks, but what you run into another construction site where the sidewalks are blocked and they haven't been required to put any sidewalks. And I've literally hit streets where my choice was either to walk in the street on the left or the right, and there was no sidewalk at all on that block. So I want to know, what are we going to do to not just make the streets safer for pedestrians, but really to do pedestrian-centered development downtown?
Councilman Weezer?
Thank you. We recently changed the rules, and it's true. The developments that we have now, they weren't required to open up for pedestrian access to walk through the sidewalks. Working with the planning department, we now have new protocols in place where each developer will be required to allow for pedestrian passage. And it's true, sometimes you walk and your only option is to walk in the street with traffic going forward. We also started a new initiative called DTLA Forward, which we get together with a number of departments each month and talk about how we're going to make downtown LA a lot more pedestrian friendly, not only in terms of signage, but expanding sidewalks, and to look at the circulation of our traffic, of our cars in the streets. We have so much new activity here. Our street circulation is based on the 60s, and so we want to look at how we could change some of that, and that's going to be an ongoing initiative. But relief is there. We're not going to open up more of those sidewalks for you and others.
John Rigardi, in the coverage you've done of sort of the pedestrian nature of downtown Los Angeles, what have you seen change?
Oh, she's absolutely right. There are, if you are walking, particularly if you're going from maybe the southern part of the financial district down to South Park, you have to do this crazy jigsaw jumping because on one side a sidewalk's closed and then the next block, the other side of the street, the sidewalk's closed. We've done editorials on this on how dangerous it is because, as the councilman referenced, people are having to walk in the street. Someone is going to get whacked by a car and killed if they haven't already. It's a real problem.
Yeah, in New York, isn't it, they have to build along the sidewalk a little protective place for you to walk, but LA doesn't have that requirement?
Now we do, as of
Okay.
a couple of months ago, and it was because of several people coming to my office, bringing that to our attention. There's new guidelines in place for anybody who's pulling a permit to build, that they will be presented with the proper way of doing that.
All right. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Mike, and I live in Chinatown in Los Angeles. My question is, given the range of different perspectives we have in the panel, what each of you what would be your vision of a successful downtown Los Angeles in around 20 years' time? How would you characterize a success here?
That's a great question. So what would it look like in 20 years, your ideal? Quickly down the line. Brigham Young, I want to start with you. What would it look like?
For me, I think, I come at it from a very environmental and pedestrian-oriented perspective. So, my dream for downtown LA is that it becomes a vibrant, active, 24/7 community that's walkable and pedestrian-oriented. As you know, Los Angeles is a resource hog. It's a car city, and it's unsustainable. And I feel like downtown Los Angeles is a very green model for Los Angeles to follow. I'd like to see more businesses come into downtown LA so it becomes a self-sustaining community for the residents here.
All right, so like its own, people could stay in downtown, have all the services.
And walk and take public transportation.
The question's 20 years, what will it look like?
What would you like to see, your ideal downtown?
It was what my idea was, or what is it going to look like?
Yeah, successful downtown. What would it look like for you?
Success. What would it look like? Well, it's successful already. It really is. There's just we have a problem with the homeless, but I think it's going to look like Santa Monica meets Rancho Cucamonga in 20 years.
No, not as long as
Carol
I'm there.
Schatz, yeah.
My definition is more. We want to see more of everything. We want to see more cultural institutions. We want to see more residents. We want to see more businesses coming in. And we want to see a proper balance between pedestrian-oriented development and cars, because let's not forget that the vast number of those 500,000 people who are getting to downtown to work so they can pay their taxes, et cetera, are coming in by car. This is not New York, and it never will be in terms of mass transit. And if
Well, you're not going to have the carrying capacity for 500,000 people for a very, very long. You're not going to have carrying capacity for 500,000 people on public transit for a very long time.
That's correct. And so we have to balance those interests.
All right. John Regardi.
You need better connections. There's a lot of diverse pockets in this area, but they're not necessarily connected right now. You might have a cluster in one area, then a few dead blocks, and then another cluster. There's a lot of different things. So you need to have these pockets filled in a way that's navigable without taking your car out of the garage to go everywhere. Maybe this is pedestrian access. Maybe this is finally a good bike share plan starting in downtown. You need to have a navigable neighborhood that's friendly for many different levels that you can get around in.
Councilman,
Real
what's
quickly,
your,
the key to downtown, I believe, is honestly 3rd and 4th Street because it connects the 5 to the 110. And if we can develop those two main thoroughfares and make them safe and walkable, connect the Artist District with the historic core through Skid Row, that's when the city downtown will be truly one piece.
Councilman, what do you think of that?
More multimodal transportation, which includes pedicabs, bikes, and pedestrian-friendly streets and sidewalks, and a new regional connector that's going to be a subway underneath downtown that connects all the light rail, a new streetcar that will connect neighborhoods and allow you to leave your car in one place and just take the streetcar all around town.
Connector's going to be a big difference because you won't have to do as much transferring to use public transit.
Exactly, and along with good public transportation and multimodal transportation, more public amenities such as parks, which we're building a new park on First and Broadway. We're building one in the Arts District, and we're re-envisioning Pershing Square, which is the city's oldest park, and we're examining how we could really make that accessible to the public. At the end of the day, we also want to encourage the economic activity, which means more high-rises, more hotels, and an expanded convention center to get that economic activity that we need for downtown Los Angeles. And last but not least, a way to deal with mental health issues for our homeless individuals, because after all, 1/3 of homeless individuals have some type of mental health issue.
Alice Callahan.
Well, my dream would be that we would have gentrified Skid Row, but for its original inhabitants and not for others, and that you would go in there and it would be a place where 9,000 people continued to live, the poorest of the poor, on $227 a month. Because I think the measure of a city is not that it has a Whole Foods store, but how it houses the poorest of the poor.
All right. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Eric. I reside at Hancock Park, and my question, I will just read it. I hear that everyone on the panel is concerned with the homelessness issue, and that is tied to the revitalization of downtown, but how are you interested in working with the city to improve the conditions? How will you be involved in making that change? What are you doing actively?
Who'd want to start with that, the way of really making the change, pushing for that?
The question is,
Councilman.
how are we, what are we doing to make that change?
Make the change. You guys have a lot of ideas and dreams, but like, what are you individually
Yes.
working towards, even collaborating to like make these things possible?
And let me say, as I said earlier, I think there's been an intensified focus on homeless issues. There's been a huge neglect in the past. Just today in council, we passed, the council agreed to create a coordinator for the city to handle homelessness issues. You would think this day and age that, we would have someone, a point person to do that.
I thought you had someone to do that.
We haven't up to this point. We had someone in the mayor's office, but not somebody.
That
this
the
is
council.
new. This is new for the mayor. This is going to be institutional, to build the institutional knowledge and have an accountability that could coordinate efforts within the city and externally as well. We're building the infrastructure. We also committed $100 million to homelessness in the next year's budget, which is something that is new. And we are figuring out right now how to build our housing trust fund to commit more dollars for affordable housing for the long term. And the critical piece to this, as I ended earlier in my other point, which is a mental health piece, which is difficult to handle because there's been lawsuits about when and how we can commit a person to get the attention they need. Right now, we're just sending them over to county jail.
John Regardi, I wanted to ask you, we're getting short on time, but if you had to pick, the biggest development you think's coming along that's going to be contentious downtown, what is it?
You may start to see some projects proposed on empty parking lots right now, and some people who are living in other parking lots may say, well, if you build that there, it's going to destroy our view. We've not had too much NIMBYism in downtown yet, and that may be one of the aspects that develops.
Yeah, Carol Schatz, what speak to that issue of developments that might be creating conflict?
That's really where the conflict will lie. Because we haven't had a NIMBY population, and now we do. which is a mark of the fact that we have, built our residential population into a real community. And like other communities in the city, people want to preserve what they have. But it's a nice problem to have, because 20 years ago, we didn't have any housing at all. And I think that is a critical part of every great city. You cannot define a great city by a beach, 2 theme parks, and a sign.
I also, in closing, want to thank all of you for speaking candidly, sharing about what's most important to you about making downtown Los Angeles a more livable place for everybody who's there. I want to thank you all very much. Our guests, John Rigardi, the LA Downtown News Executive Editor, Alice Callahan, founder and director of Las Familias del Pueblo, Brigham Yen, who is the founder of the DTLA Rising blog and a downtown resident, Los Angeles City Councilman Jose Huizar, who represents this district. Also with us, Carol Schatz, president of the Downtown Center Business Improvement District, and Brian Trainum, co-owner of the Escondite Bar. Thank you all very much for being with us. Thank you for joining us at the Broad Museum here in downtown Los Angeles on the Grand Avenue Arts Corridor. We hope to see you in Redlands if you're an Inland Empire resident at the University of Redlands Wednesday night, December 9th. It'll be our final 30th anniversary Air Talk on the Road special program. Stay tuned. Coming up next, BBC NewsHour. Have a great afternoon.